For joining us.
Wolf, thank you.
Joining us now, Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. Senator, thanks for coming in. Let's get to this so-called fiscal cliff. The president has set a goal, as you know, $4 trillion in debt reduction over the next decade. Are there any specific ways of reaching that figure that both of you might agree on?
Well, you know, I think one compromise that I can agree with the Democrats on is that we need to cut some military spending. So I think the compromise is conservatives like myself who think national defense is very important should compromise on military spending, and the liberals should compromise on entitlements and on social welfare spending. I think that compromise could get to some spending cuts.
Here's the question, though. Both sides are going to have to compromise on this. Beyond defense spending, is there any other compromise that you could see you supporting?
Well, it mostly has to be, to me, on the spending side. We used to spend about 20% of GDP. We're now spending 25% of GDP. So federal spending has gone up at an alarming rate in the last 4 years. And when people come to me and say, oh, we just have to raise taxes on rich people, one, there's not enough money. And two, you often find that when you raise rates, you get less revenue. And sometimes you find when you lower rates, you get more revenue.
What do you make of your fellow Republican Congressman Tom Cole's proposal that Republican lawmakers should extend the tax rates for those making $250,000 a year or less, that's about 98% of Americans, before the end of this year, and deal with the tax rates for the wealthiest Americans at a later date?
Once you separate them out, there's not a lot of sympathy among the public for rich people. They say, oh, let's get those rich people. But the public often doesn't realize the rich people are already paying all of the income tax. Top 1% pay almost half of the income tax. So when the president says, oh, it's bad to raise taxes on everyone, that would be tax-mageddon, but I want to raise it on 40% of the nation's income, I think that's a mistake. If it's bad to raise taxes on everyone, it's also bad to raise taxes on 40% of the nation's income. It's better to leave that money in the hands of those who earned it, leave it in Kentucky, leave it in the private sector.
So I understand you don't want to raise the tax rates on anyone, rich or middle class or anyone, but what about capping deductions, eliminating loopholes, stuff like that? Are you open to that?
Yes, if it's part of tax reform, and that's why it's not going to happen in this. If we were to lower rates, see, for example, I think you could lower the top rate from 35 to 33 and actually get more revenue and get rid of some deductions at the same time. But I'm not going to vote to bring more revenue to Washington. I want less money coming to Washington, less money spent up here, and that's how you get the economy to grow. We're not going to have more economic growth if we send more money to Washington. We'll have less economic growth.
You know, if all the Republicans hold firm to that position you just spelled out in significant detail, there's not going to be a deal, you know, between now and December 31st. And all Americans, for all practical purposes, middle class, rich, they're all going to see their tax rates going up starting January 1st. How are you going to feel about that?
Well, the thing is last year we did make a deal. The president came forward and said when you have sluggish economic growth, and it was about 2%, he says raising taxes is a bad idea. Well, we have economic growth less than 2% now. Why would raising taxes now be a good idea? If it was a bad idea last year, it's still a bad idea. And I think, while I do think there's room for compromise, I don't think one person gets to define where the compromise is.
Senator, the administration, the president who was reelected, impressive electoral college win. He got a majority of the vote, won by several million votes. He ran on this notion of raising taxes on the wealthiest Americans. I suspect he's probably going to hold pretty firm on that, but we'll see what happens over the next 3-4 weeks because that clock is ticking. Anything you want to leave us with?
No, but as long as we're spending money on robots, squirrels, don't raise any taxes.
Yeah, okay. Hey, Senator, thanks very much.